Hello and welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is Alex Hogue and I'm going to be your host for the next 90 minutes or so. We're hanging out here with Mandy Celine. Mandy, how are you doing?
Hi, great. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're so happy to have you here. And it sounds like you kind of do all sorts of things. Mandy is a creative director, a video editor, a DP or director of photography, for those of you that don't know what that means. And she also owns her own creative agency called Breadbox Studios. Based out in the UK, and today she's going to be showing us her workflow for color correction inside of Adobe Premiere Pro using Lumetri. Not sure which way is the proper way to say that, but we're going to be talking about Lumetri scopes and then how to take a frame from video, bring it into Photoshop, use Generative Fill, and then be able to reframe some of our video back inside of Premiere. So super exciting stuff. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and lots of
so
other color stuff in the middle there as well, which will be good.
yeah, no, I'm really excited to get into it. So I won't take up much more time here, but I do want to say a quick hi to everyone in the chat, both over on YouTube at Adobe Live as well as on Behance. I see Joshua, Melanie, Umacorn, of course, Oliver, Annika, whole bunch of people. We got Andrew over here too. So lots of people hopping in the chat already. So excited to kick this off. Be sure to hit those subscribe buttons and also go over to Instagram and follow at Adobe Live on Instagram to keep up to date on things. So with all that out of the way, let's hear a little bit about you, Mandy, and
Oh
yeah, give me
gosh.
just kind of a bit of background, where you're from, how did you get into what you're doing, that sort of stuff.
I actually have been doing this my entire adult life, so which is really refreshing because when I went to university, I did psychology to be a clinical psychologist, and while I was doing it, I was like, that is mad depressing. I need to do something much more fun. So I left and immediately went into editing, and because I was really into YouTube, it was really natural for me to get hired because I just had a lot more on I guess software experience than people just graduating. So I like just landed an editing job off the bat with a charity here called Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, and then it kind of happened from there. So I would actually thank YouTube for a lot of my success, honestly.
Awesome. Well, tell us a bit about your reel here. What are we taking a look at? Is this just things you've worked on recently or just collectively?
It is definitely more collectively, but it is only within the last all of this stuff now in the last 5 years, I guess. And there's maybe one or two clips that are a little older because I'm just that proud of them. Almost all of this, I think, bar one clip I filmed, I directed almost all of this as well, which is great. And I actually we're building my agency, Redbox Studios. We're actually building that show reel separately. This is like my director DP show reel, and I've edited everything on here as well. So it's like trying to make sure I've had involvement in everything. I went into beauty quite solidly in London, did some stuff on London Fashion Week, have worked with brands like Hello Sunday, Trini London, Korea Cosmetics, um, and other ones like Urban Decay and all sorts. And then I kind of branched out, did some salons, hair shows. There's L'Oreal Color Trophy in there, which is a big deal if you know the hair world. If you don't, that's totally fine. um, and there's a couple of music videos in there. An amazing artist called Ledley. I've filmed with her a couple of times, and she's actually popping like off in the UK at the moment, which is awesome with her new single.
That's
Um,
fantastic. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love
yeah,
what I'm
and lots of
seeing here,
travel.
just the creativity and all of this and in the editing and all of it. So today we're
Thank
going to
you.
be talking about color correction, and we already have Joshua in the chat. Definitely wants the rundown of color correction inside of Premiere. So I'm sure we got a lot to get through, but before we jump over to Premiere real quick, but let us know like where can people find your work and just get to know you a little bit more.
I am Mandy Celine everywhere essentially. Like there is a TikTok that's like it's Mandy Celine, but I'll be honest, I use that personally. So I have like six on there, and it was me trying to figure out how to use the UI. Um, but otherwise, yeah, Mandy Celine on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I'm youtube.com/Mandy, but I don't post that often there anymore. MandyCeline.com is the current website. Currently getting upgraded to Breadbox Studios. So
Yeah,
lots happening.
I'm in the same world of that transitioning as well into like LLC or actual business. So it's pretty exciting. I'd love to pick your brain on that another time. But congratulations with that. And
Oh, thank you.
also,
Yeah.
I do have to say, this is a little off topic, but I took a look at your Instagram this morning, and I got to say, it looks like you're getting married soon. So congratulations
I
there
just
as
got
well.
married. I
Oh, well,
just
there
didn't
you
post
go.
any photos.
Excellent.
um, yeah,
Well,
thank you so
congrats. Yeah, yeah.
much. Yeah, it
Awesome.
was great. Did that like
Good.
last month or so. So really recent.
Well, congratulations. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So
Excellent.
what do you
So
got for us?
I've got a few things for you. I'm just gonna get rid of this sequence down here. This is my general color kind of grading setup UI that I like to do. That's a spoiler for later. Let's go to the one we'll deal with first. Basically, I've worked with a lot of beauty brands, so I decided, and they allow me to use their clips. That's a really big thing where I'm allowed to show those publicly. I have a couple of examples of stuff where I have had to bake in color and maybe it didn't go well, or stuff that I got sent that was not the right color that I'm going to regrade that I've had to regrade previously. Um, got log footage because if you might heard of 5 second films, they're kind of popping off on TikTok and Instagram right now because they've like rediscovered that their format was perfect for short video. But Vine killed them for a bit and now they're back getting like literally millions of hits every day. It's insane.
Oh, the good old days of Vine videos.
Yeah, and I've filmed and with Brian Ferenzi, who directed this sketch, and Matthew Hargreaves, or Matt Lobster as he's known online, he runs Ed's World. He wrote this one. It's called Catch the Game, if you want to find it online and see how the finished product looked like. But we were filming this, and this is just a log clip example because I'm going to go through some really fun settings with log and also how to reframe this using Photoshop Beta and their Firefly technology. And then just another example of a log clip if we need it. So this is kind of what it looks like today, what we're going to play with.
Perfect.
So that will be
And
good.
we're already getting love for your reel, by the way, in the chat. Just people are loving
Oh,
it.
that's so
So definitely
sweet.
great work there.
Thank
Looking at
you.
these clips, so you said these are log. Not to get too in the weeds, but did you say what this was shot on? And like, is this Red or is this
This is actually
Canon or
a Sony A7S Mark
okay?
III because they're basically FX3s. So they're fine. It's I really enjoy using it. I'm looking for a personal upgrade. This is just one we had, and it was fully rigged out with like a matte box and everything. It was like for a 5 second video comedy sketch. It's
Always
pretty
good.
insane.
No, I think it's good just for people in the chat to know because I mean, Sony, the A7s are very popular cameras. So, people see
Yeah,
this
I think
footage and like, hey, this is what I can get.
everything here was shot on either an A7 or an FX3, an A7S Mark III as well, if they're curious. Everything. Um, so we'll
And
figure something out.
so a lot of people in Premiere probably haven't seen this layout. Can you show us how you got to this?
So this is actually my bespoke layout. I made this a while ago, like a Mandy Celine color 2022, if you can see in the corner here. They have one here, but I might have messed it up at this point. Yeah, it's similar. It's really similar. So it's actually almost the same. It's actually almost the same. But it's really easy to like make it. You can like close panels, you can add panels, you can move them to different windows if you want just by dragging them. I like to have my project down here when I'm like searching. I tend to also have my effects actually down here so I can show you how I change up that setup. And that's pretty much the exact setup I use. And I have my scopes here. So this is all I really need to focus on when I'm doing my color. And I change my workspaces depending on what I'm doing.
Awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of people, myself included, when I first started coloring, you look at the scopes and you look at all this stuff and it looks very intimidating. So I'm definitely hoping you can break it down in simple form for everyone here.
Oh, I'm happy to. I'm going to now take over for a bit, I guess, to tell you
Yeah.
all about scopes. So I work with these 3 scopes. The top one here is a Luma waveform histogram. The one on the right, I will get into deeper on them so that you know the names. This isn't like a 30-second, and you know it now. This is a vector scope. I use this more with color saturation and skin tones. And the one down here is just to make sure you can see what is too saturated and clipping in that, or how level your colors are. And I'll explain that more. This is an RGB parade, this one here. So this one, let's see if I can expand it a bit more so you can see just a bit
Oh
better.
yeah, that's awesome.
This is, so I'm going to start with the Luma waveform. I think that this is the most important one. If I had to get rid of all of them, this is my personal favorite. There are, I think, another like 6 or 7 scopes you can dive into. There's only so much information my brain can take. I stick with these three. So Luma waveform is mostly your exposure of the image, stuff that's like really bright and really dark and a bit in the middle. Your scale on the right here is the one that matters. You can ignore this, especially as a beginner. Ignore this. This is bit rates and it's nonsense, unless you really know the numbers. This one here is much easier because it literally is a scale of 0 to 100, and that makes much more sense to most people. It's also called IRE. The scale is IRE. I think that's like International Radiographer Engineers. Like it's named after those guys. I forget the name.
If anyone knows the name, fun trivia. Let's hear it. But I'm
Yeah.
impressed you even knew what that stood for.
I usually know it like off the bat. It's just my brain's decided to delete that information for
I
this
definitely
moment. And
wouldn't have known it.
honestly, it's just such a like throwaway fact. It's like an IRE scale. It's named after the guys that designed it. It makes no sense. So
I'm really hoping that'll come up on trivia night now in the future so I can get some points.
now you know. 0 is your blacks, and I'll show you how this works with the basic color correction panel in a moment. And 100 is your whites. So you really don't want to be flatlining on either end of that. That's like your brights. It means you're losing information at that point. You're crushing your blacks, as you call it, and like your whites are burned essentially. And then if we were to go through, it's like it goes blacks, shadows. Where's the word for it? Whites and highlights, or highlights and whites? I forget which one. I
I
think
believe
it's
it
whites
goes.
and highlights. Maybe I'm wrong. I
I
usually have the other panel to tell me. Hang on, I can
highlights and then whites, I think.
I'll be able to figure that out in like a second. It's over here. Sorry. Um, it's highlights and whites, I think. No, whites and highlights. It's whites and highlights. Sorry,
Got
my
it
brain
wrong
just
too.
like.
I got it wrong too.
So basically, between about 20 and 50, you're playing with your shadows, and you kind of want it evenly distributed around that 20 to 50. Same with your blacks between like 0 to 20. If it's too high on that 20, they look really flat. You want to bring it, I would say 0 to 10 personally, but that depends on if you like a contrasty look. And there was that whole age between like 2012 and 16 where everything was super faded. So, you know, color is subjective. It's art at the end of the day. I can tell you what it's meant to be, but it changes constantly. It's trending. And then 50 to 80 is that highlights. I've already forgotten which way around it is. It's that area of like your middling lights, and then the top end is like your whites, your bright. Like you don't want that near crushing near 100. You lose detail. That's when your sky is white and you lose that kind of dynamic range, that quality. So like this is important for me because I want to see basically this Luma waveform distributed quite evenly. I'd actually say the clip I have the play header on is a bit dark for me. I want to bring some of that up. Mm-hmm. And I like to help that be less make it slightly more contrasty as well, but also like just not make it fall too dark. And then over here, this one's really useful, and a lot of people don't understand how to read it a lot of the time. They just go, oh, these are the colors and this line is skin tones, and I know I roughly want to be on that line for skin tones. This doesn't work for all skin tones for obvious reasons. Some of us are much paler than others, or much darker than others. So but generally, I find with my skin tone, I can land around this line, but you'll generally be around here for skin tones. And then this is actually the broadcast safe zone for color. So if you go outside of that, it means that you're losing information on screens potentially with your colors because they are oversaturated. So as you can see, the skin tones in here are quite saturated. I know that red is the skin tone of the girl and her lips because it's a beauty clip and that's all that's in there. It's her hair, a blue sky, and her face. So I know that that's too much.
Super helpful. Yeah, if anyone missed any of this, it will be on replay. So like feel free to pause it, rewind, go back through. There's a lot of good information here.
I've
This is
just seen it
super
says the
helpful.
Institute of Radio Engineers. I was very close.
Yep, yep. And we also had a question coming over from YouTube, and I know we touched on this a little bit, but I guess we didn't ask if it was your favorite. But what is your favorite camera to use, just in general? I
Oh
guess. Yeah.
wow. I actually do. I mean, I have a love for all things Sony. I used their FX7 before it was the bit of a dinosaur. Um which is like the FX6 is now, I guess. There isn't quite a new FX7. So um but I like the FX3 for like it's just easy, it's small and compact. I miss I for me I wish it had internal NDs which on filters so that like you can like change the exposure on your
Yeah, yeah,
camera.
that's definitely helpful. If it's really bright out to, still get that depth of field that you want as you
And
yourself,
also
your
I
DP.
like to get, I think that that's what makes an image look expensive is like when everything feels like it's there purposefully and you can see clouds and the sky and it's not blown out when you're shooting outside. That's
Well,
what I think of.
absolutely that and some good color correction for sure.
Absolutely. It's also got an impressive dynamic range, so it's quite good and it's budget friendly because like for a cinema camera that is on the low scale despite it being about 4.5 grand, which is kind of gross. But I will say that lower end models are pretty decent these days for Sony, and so are Canons. My husband, new word, sorry, I'm getting used to that. He's entirely Canon for his photography setup and is
Same
ride and die
here.
for them.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
used to shoot on C100s and C200s as well. So I
Excellent.
guess whatever the tool is good, ultimately, the new phones are even insane. I've been editing lots of phone footage the last 2 years.
Oh yeah. I've had scenarios come up where I'm actually shooting things and being told to shoot it on like, an iPhone or something in vertical from the phone, which is just blows my mind that people
I
are
had,
actually
yeah,
asking for it to be shot with a phone for
I
some
had a
businesses, some things.
top five studio, like the one of the ones that's in the strikes. Currently, they asked me a year ago if I can shoot entirely on a mobile phone.
It's happening. It's here.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I totally can, but my price isn't going down. So,
Good for
um,
you. Good for you.
well, it's the tool. It's not. I'm still labor
Exactly.
anyway. That's a whole other discussion.
We digress. We digress. All
We
right. So
digress.
what's next here? What do you got for us?
So like that's really important for your, I guess, like more. I think of that scope as the skin scope personally, and the RGB parade will show you how even are the colors distributed within your frame essentially, and you want this to be mostly similar. I say mostly because when you don't have a human in the frame, it's very easy to line these up actually, unless like you have a very dominant color on the frame, such as a blue sky or the reason it's in my head is because of the clip it's on. Or if there is a human predominantly on the frame, you're going to find that your red is just going to kick off more because we all have blood. So we're all a bit more red. It's going to make the frame just a bit more red. So that's kind of the basics of those scopes. And I will be more involved in showing you how they work as we go through our basic correction panel, which is really important to go through our clips in a minute. So I want to, if everyone's okay with it, I'd love to take you through the Lumetri color panel itself because I feel like some people get nervous about it and all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's dive into it.
So they did a redesign on this. Adobe did like a year ago, and it was very minor. And it was this tool up here, which I always draw beginners to because it's phenomenal. I wish I had this when I was learning because the old auto tool, this is not the same beast. The old auto tool was not the best, and we all know it because they changed it. So basically, when you click auto on a clip now, it guesses and shows you how it made those changes and makes an educated guess based on what it knows. It's an AI feature, essentially. It's reading the image and saying, I think these values of these shades of where the exposure is in shadows, whites, highlights, colors, saturation, all sorts should be around here. And as a beginner, you can really see how these sliders interact with each other. By changing the intensity. So this is 0, and you can go up to like 100, and it's like, this is like everything we're giving that we suggest. After that, it's not going to look great. And in the middle, it tends to still do like it like that. I would be happy with this if I was doing the quickest job in the world,
Yeah.
because the before and after, it does exactly what I said on that scope when I was like, I think this image is a bit dark in the middle. It brightens her skin. So I'd be happy with that. Now, for the sake of this image, I'm going to reset it and start from the beginning. So this is what we're dealing with. This is a client of mine that asked me to give them all the footage on the day because they had originally I was going to edit it, so I was going to shoot in log. Unfortunately, they then told me they have an editor on the team who did not know how to use log, and it just turns out it was an intern. Oh. It happens more frequently than you think. This has happened to me 3 times where they'd be like, we must have the video, the videos be able to just be sent to a social media manager so they can like just upload a clip on a loop or whatever, or on a story, and they have no idea how to color grade. And that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And they don't want them to go rogue and color grade it in an app and then it doesn't look brand consistent. So they just want to have it there. So the request was to bake in a color, and at worst, if they did commercial stuff with it, they have another editor they could grade it. And I was like, okay. So we baked in a color. It was all approved. But for me, I think this is quite saturated. It's personally not my preference, but the brand was happy. So
okay.
Each their own. So for me, when I look at this, I see that it's a bit dark, as I said, in the shadows, and I would play with that first because I know that that's going to touch on the skin. Now, what's interesting is as you see when I move something, you noticed all these graphs moving. Mm-hmm. And it's because that's called trace, by the way, and that they're actually of the image there. So I can tell that this part is her hand. You learn how to read them like x-rays, like doctors read x-rays.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah, because it's going left to right, right?
Yeah, so you learn that that's her hand. And then let's see, this has got to be her hair. It's the darkest part of the image. So there's that. And then so this is the blue sky. So you can see that there's a body in the middle of it. So it's blocked.
I remember when I first learned that, and it was just like I don't know. Once you know that that's the image, it's almost a game. You kind of look and you're like, all right, here's this really bright spot. Where is that? Which is just so helpful in figuring out, maybe if something needs to be masked or changed or.
Yeah, like I know that this bright spot is this blue bit here.
Yep.
Which I'm glad isn't brighter because basically we shot this in a February in London in a daylight studio, pouring with rain, and this is a sunscreen ad campaign. So it was like put up blue paper roll and see if we can make this look like sky later. Mm-hmm. And I'll get into that in a second, actually.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the deal with that. And then I would probably play with the highlights just a little bit because I want to make her face just a tiny bit brighter because it's sunscreen. She's got to be glowy and warm. I notice when I do that, you lose a little bit of the saturation, but that's fine because we're still a bit over here. If I really, by the way, I'll show you in a minute how I wanted to check if the skin tones are on this line for everyone involved, because I always do like a triangle on a face and see if it lands there, and if it does, and I can just keep tweaking, just looking at that mask.
Okay,
but
yeah,
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Getting ahead of myself. But I'd play basic with these. You can tell with contrast, it pulls the image, so it is making that more contrast. You can see it get darker in the blacks and brighter in like those brighter colors. I don't want to play with that. I think this is quite a contrasted image as it is, really. So I'm going to reset that, and you can reset them by double tapping.
And so when you're first starting off, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you're first starting off here in the coloring process, a lot of people, I guess there's color correction and there's color grading. But can you explain, I don't know, maybe you know the difference, but a lot of times you'll have clients and basically what you'll want to give them is something that's, the blacks are black, the whites are white, and it looks good, versus maybe the alternative is it actually has a particular look or a particular LUT applied to it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So people, I think, confuse color correction and grading a lot and think they are the same thing. They're not. Absolutely not. You're right. You hit the money on the head there. Color correction is the act of normalizing an image to give to a client. So you're like, this is a correct, normal image. It has no artistic vision. It is accurate with good exposure, enjoy, and not oversaturated. And you can give that to a client. Color grading is subjective. It is art. It really is.
I
And it's
love
like
that.
painting. So like there are less rules around color grading because some people will want an image that's really saturated or they want it quite neon-y. And that's where it like that look comes in. Like a kid's show tends to be very saturated and
Hmm.
bright and bold. Whereas then you have like Joker where it's actually quite a like the skin tones are normalized to an extent, like exposure wise, but there is a huge lean in it. It's much more blue than it should be in areas. It's much more green. It's much more orange. And the same like Blade Runner 2049. That's an
Perfect
entirely orange
example.
film.
Yes. Perfect
So
example.
um,
Perfect.
trying
So
to
what we're
pull
doing
these
here
out of my
is,
head.
yeah, so what we're doing here is really just trying to get it looking correct.
Correct. So at the moment, when I do basic correction, it's always the act of getting it correct. Now, I will just say quickly, and I'll show you later, if you want to do an input LUT. Wow, that was a mouthful. Um, yeah, here is like your Rec 709 LUTs. And that's the only LUT I would put here. I would never put a creative or stylized LUT because people tend to make lookup tables. They're called LUTs. They're like filters, presets.
Mhm.
I would never put one that has like a teal and orange look here because I can't change its intensity. You put that in actually the creative panel down here. The basic panel is, as you said, a color correction panel, making things normal. Um, so I would play around basically and I'd have a look. Now I have a lot of leeway on my whites. I can see that. I'd probably want them a little bit more here. It's going to be daytime, bright. We want like that harder light look than the softer light look in theory. And actually, I'm happy with the blacks. I wouldn't want them darker. I certainly wouldn't like she's got a black top. I want to show her hair that she has individual strands of hair.
Right.
So I enjoy that. So that was for me, this is like quite basic way of changing that up. I might take that saturation down here or I would do it in curves. So like, but as you can see with that vector scope, it shrinks. And that's how you know that that's a saturation scope. Um,
Yeah, and
and you can
as
actually
Mike's
see it in
saying in
the,
the, oh sorry, yeah,
yeah.
as Mike was
No,
saying in the
it's fine.
chat here, you can tell that skin tone by the vector scope there, like whether it's off or on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If I wanted to check it, as I was saying earlier, I would go to my effect controls very quickly. Um, I would grab, I believe it's my opacity one. I would just do a little triangle so I can see what that is. Go back to my scopes and I can see here that
Oh,
it's
excellent.
just
Yeah.
it should just be just the why is there blue in it? There we go. Took a second to update. That it is entirely on that line. So I know that the skin tones are pretty accurate there.
Oh, I love that little tip there of just throwing a quick little mask on there.
Yeah, I like it. And you can like as I said, you'll always have on the RGB parade, like the reds will be higher on skin tones. There's just
Hmm.
not avoiding that unless you're making a zombie. And that's a whole other thing. Let's get rid of that mask though, because we don't need it. There we go. So that would be me on this clip anyway for like correcting color. And then I just want to move on to, I would usually, if you know what, before I move further, we should dip into the creative panel because there is a difference between vibrance and saturation. And sometimes people are like, there feels like there's too many colors here, but I can't, when I turn down the saturation, she looks corpsey or when I turn it up, it doesn't look right. Like it's too much color. What happens? So vibrance is, it pushes up every color from its lowest point up a little bit, but saturation just moves every color to the top. And like or to the bottom. It takes every color as like everything as it is now really high, or everything as it is now desaturated completely. Whereas vibrance will take either the bottom and top end of each color and just bring those down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I've always known vibrance. I don't know if it's accurate or not, maybe you know, but I've always known that vibrance is a little less on like the oranges and skin tones typically. I
Yeah,
don't know if that's
because
true or not, but that's what I was told
yeah,
years ago, and I just went with it.
it is for that reason. So when I up the saturation, it's taking that color point and raising every range of that color just up completely on that spectrum.
Mhm.
So she looks a bit like she belongs in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory right now. It's not the look we're going for a beauty commercial. Whereas with vibrance, you'll notice that it's only pushing that bottom end and increasing the saturation on that up, which is nice. So that's why it's kinder. It's
Yeah,
also why it's
excellent
darker.
breakdown.
So I always like to point that out while I'm going through. Um, let's see. I like it a little bit. a little bit, because we did desaturate her slightly. I'm just gonna bring a little bit back, just a little bit,
Just a
just
little
give it a little bit of jazz.
bit.
Um, and then I usually dip into my curves. And so the big thing for this shot in particular was I needed this blue to look like sky. And I kept telling them, like, I'm not going to be able to do it in camera. It has to be done in post. I can just give you what the camera can see. I'm not got like a magic superpower. Um, so
Not without a lot of
um,
extra hours.
no, and I only had like a hour setup as well, so it's not like I could
Oh,
go in deep. Like this was like a quick post-COVID commercial process.
which
It
is
was
pretty typical with a lot of
yeah.
clients in editing world.
So I tend to grab this pipette. I just went ahead and did it because it's natural to me. On the hue versus hue, and I just clicked the blue. It selects out the blue end of that spectrum, and I just play with this up and down. And I think that already looks more like realistic sky.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be like pretend the sun's behind her or something. And we made a pretty convincing commercial out of that she was indeed in a park outside applying sunscreen.
Ooh,
Um, I know.
that's
Um,
yeah, okay.
so if we look at where we started, it was this, and we're already here, and they're all very subtle changes, but satisfying. I personally enjoy it. I always compare color, like color grading, color correction, to like painting a wall, because unlike other editing, it takes ages for it to feel like it's good. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's gonna be great. Oh, I'm terrible. It's really bad. Oh, I'm the worst editor. And then you're like, oh, actually, it's working. Like out of
Yeah, right.
nowhere, you're like, it makes sense. Whereas like I feel like color grading is like, oh, I can already see results. So I find
Very
it very
true.
satisfying.
I also
Um,
feel like with color correction, for me at least, if you have a whole sequence of shots you need to color correct, I will start out and I'll color the first shot and I'll say, hey, this looks great. And I get down and maybe like a couple hours later, I'm like at the end and I get to the last shot and I color it. And then I go back and look at the first one. I was like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? This looks terrible. And like just balancing all of them out to look correct is like an entire another chore in itself.
that's what I do like the step afterwards with an adjustment layer and just be like, and this is the grade, it all
Yep.
looks consistent, and that's always really satisfying. But correction, I think, is a bit of a hard job. But this is what I did mostly for this. I think when I sent it off to client, I might have done hue versus luma if I thought this was too hot, clicked it, and I can raise that up and down. Um,
What are your thoughts on
I,
those, like on the hue versus hue, that sort of stuff? I've noticed when you use those, it's great, but you have to be very like a little goes a long ways with it. Like you don't want to bring that bar curve like all the way to the bottom because it'll start showing pixels in weird spots.
oh,
Do you notice that as
absolutely.
well? So like just a little bit
Yeah.
like can do a lot.
So if we go on her skin, because I know it's going to be a completely different area, it's so easily like to turn her purple.
There you go. Done. Send
um,
it.
but you can very quickly, like with hue versus hue, you can distort it. It'll bring in other colors, and so a little goes along. Oh, I've just gotten rid of all my work. I find a little goes absolutely a long way. I would be very careful about it. Um, I now need to try and by eye make this. No, it's too much red. I'm using the Betoscope. That's about right. That's great. Fixed it. Thanks, Betoscope. But a little goes an insanely long way. I could change her nail polish, which I think looks not the best. Not that node though. It's not a node, is it? I don't know what these are called. Yeah, so if I
uh,
wanted to change a nail polish, it's quite quick and easy. That's a nicer color, I think. So I'd do that or something.
yeah, it looks pretty natural.
So yeah, just more orange against the blue. I think it looks better.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a personal choice. We did it for there's a product shot where she holds up, and we did it all for that. So actually, like with this, I didn't have to do too much, but that's a lot of post like annoying work to do on a clip, which they were like baking color. Actually, can you resend it completely graded? Which has happened twice. The other clips in particular, these ones, I had to shoot with the color baked in for a very large beauty and makeup brand. And I, at this point, said, I think it's a bad idea. I think we should do log. I have a feeling I'm going to have to regrade everything. I just have a feeling because this client kept telling me, oh, it's amazing on this screen. I don't like it on this screen. Bane of my life is explaining how colors are different on the screens you have, depending on
Mm-hmm.
if your screen is color correct or not.
I'm so
Um,
glad you brought that up because I was going to mention that as well.
I think I've got PTSD from this particular case because I kept trying. I had to explain it over and over and over, and also There's gamma differences in Premiere to Broadcast Safe, and
Mm.
Apple Mac computers have completely different gamma. They're 1.96 and Broadcast is 2 point something. And Premiere at the moment does broadcast gamma. So when you export something, sometimes it looks on Apple computers a bit faded. But they have brought into the Premiere Beta the other day. You can just say, hey, just work on the Apple Gamma 1.96 so it doesn't have that problem anymore, which is my favorite feature in the world because every creative director has a Mac. So,
This is
uh,
yeah. I
oh,
hate to say it, but it's pretty true.
it's true. And it means that now when I send them something, it looks how it should. At least on an Apple computer. So that's great. And that was a whole other thing. So with these clips, you can see already that they're a little pink. And the reason for that is I kept telling them that the screen that because we did a mix of iPads, a director's monitor, like a Ninja, and I knew that my monitor and Ninja was fine, but their iPad screen was showing different. And they were like, make it pinker. And I was like, it will be pink. And then they kind of maybe changed the image. So it came off a lot pinker than I wanted it to. So again, it's a really simple fix, I think, for this kind of thing, where you can click on something like her teeth, which would not naturally be pink. Generally, we don't tend to have fleshy looking teeth. And I would just put more yellow in there, and it already like it's so minor, but it does look. Is it showing? It should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing a little
Yeah,
bit here.
it's so minor, but it is definitely happening. And it looks so much better. She's suddenly like those are the true colors, and that was just fixing that issue. And I just thought I'd show you that. Whereas on the other one, they kept saying it's not saturated enough, and I was like, it's pretty
Mm.
saturated.
Yeah.
Um, and then sure enough, they get it back, and there's a lot of information here in the middle. It's got a lot going on, and it is quite, at least the reds are more saturated. So I had to go in um, and manually change on 200 clips, mind you. I was
That's a good
I
time
always
there.
find this kind of footage is great to show other people because I do believe in learning from mistakes as well, because this is how you learn all the tips and tools. You don't just walk in like footage is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. um so I would just go in and just lower that bit, and that already looks a ton better. um a little, yeah, so she looks less red there. And it really kind of is more true to what her skin tone was, and I had to do all that to 200 clips. So
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And I do feel like a lot of people don't maybe understand or appreciate the work that goes into matching all the clips and making them look good, just like you said. And also just utilizing log out of camera looks really flat typically. Doesn't
yeah,
look good. And you don't really want to show your client that straight, out of the box. But
what I
that's
usually
what
do
you
is I
need.
have a lot on my Ninja, and I use my Ninja is my monitor. I use a Ninja 5.
Mhm.
Then I have a wire out to transmitter or direct to monitor or whatever, and it shows them the LUT copy
Yep.
from like the shoot, because the second you show a client log, 9 times out of 10 they're like, I really like that look, it's stylized, and you're like, that's not a look. I refuse to show you that.
That's okay, we're done here.
I think that happened on a shoot recently because I saw. Have you seen the feed? It's like a social media feed that's like uncorrected log where they find all the commercials and brands that have accidentally put out. Like,
Oh no, I would love to check that out though.
it's really cool. Like it's like big brands, like, and you're like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see it where, because you understand immediately, like that wasn't the camera guy or the editor. It was the brand. Some social media intern was like, I love the style of that. Let's have that.
Oh
And
boy.
you can't. It's so grey.
Oh boy.
But so I had these clips up because they were actually in the same setup on 2 different days. So after the first day, they turned around and went, "We don't want the wider background. We wanted it to be grey." And I was like, "But you approved it. You were there with me." But sure. And then they were still like, "It's still a bit pink." And I was like, "As I said yesterday, that is because you're watching it on your screen and not my corrected screen." Um, so yeah, these were the two kind of elements. I still think that this is quite a dark image, although it has a lot of range in it. I would actually go probably back up to basic color correction. There we go. Took a second. Um, and play with the shadows a bit because it will make the skin look smoother because the less shadow in texture of skin, the more soft and smooth. Like these are all the like the beauty things they show you,
Hmm.
to like just help make people look like they have good skin. I mean, this woman does have amazing skin, but she doesn't have this skin. So um I would play around with those kind of elements without tweaking any of the darker areas so it still looks like realistic because
Natural
that's
and good. Yeah.
yeah, natural. It's also the vibe right now in the beauty scene is to have real, at least try and look like you have real skin when it's still like altered skin. It's not airbrushed to
Yeah.
like the nth degree.
It's got to be
Um,
invisible edits, so to speak. Like they can't tell
yeah,
that it was edited, but it was.
yeah. Um, so like those are the beauty clips I had just to go through the scopes and show you how to use basic like curves tools, how to play with like changing colors, and also how we read everything. And the longer you do it, the quicker you will actually get at it, which is great because like I can read these things now just off the bat, and I'm like, oh, that's what's wrong. And it helps me like edit quicker as well because I'll just go, I have to go straight to that thing as opposed to me looking at the image going, what is wrong with you? Uh, which is not something I want to do. So I did have another clip, but it's the same thing. It was just more like they said that they wanted this to be more contrasty. I liked the preservation of the detail in this guy's locks. This was for a beauty commercial, a trans brand called Jacka Black. Um, and all I did there was honestly, it was like super simple. I went in and I saw that I had some wiggle room in my blacks and I brought it down to about here. And then I brought the shadows down just a little bit. And it kind of makes the skin look richer. So I'm not mad at it. Looks quite good. But otherwise, that image is kind of, I wouldn't want to go above that. The white is perfect to me. Like you can see his face in the middle. It sits exactly between 80 and 20, whereas that's exactly where you want everything to be from highlights to shadows. So that's great. And then I occasionally I just like to see what the computer thinks I should do. So I'll go and have a look. And I don't think that looks as good, in my opinion,
Yeah,
today.
yeah, I definitely agree. Like sometimes that works fantastic and then you can kind of tweak it from there. It's a great starting point. Other times you kind of
Yeah.
have to go in and apply, your own knowledge. Real quick, we do have Jeff from YouTube asking a question, and I actually love this question. I'm so happy that it was brought up, but it's regarding the conversation we were having earlier with different monitors and such. But how do you go about having
Yes.
the conversation with a client to tell them, hey, it's not me, it's your monitor, sort of thing? How do you go about that?
So like one client sent me an image saying I wanted it to look like this, and it was an Instagram screenshot. And actually, when I watched, no, it was a video, and I looked at the video, and actually the blacks were completely crushed, and they were like you can see artifacting.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, except for when you watched it on an iPhone, it had like the iPhone had auto corrected it. Her version had because she had a new phone, whereas mine was an iPhone 11, so I could see it more for what it was, just because it was older, so it doesn't have the technology to like be like this is what the screen image should be. Um, and I literally got a graph and I wrote down where everything. I went on my iPad actually and circled like the bottom where it was a flat line. And I was like, this is not a color correct image. You don't want this to go out because it's going to look so bad on so many screens because it's just going to look clunky. And then I sent what my image looked like, and I was like, look at all the detail preservation. Because she kept telling me that mine was too dark. When it was on her laptop, I think, her older iMac,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, and I was like, just turn your settings up, like turn up your brightness. I
Not the
think it's too
brightness.
dark. It was the brightness.
Simple as that. Yeah.
Things like that. So I've done that 2 or 3 times where I've said I had to explain it and said there is a science to it, and I'd appreciate it if like I could show you what it looks like across my monitors and stuff, or we can sit
Mm-hmm.
down. And 9 times out of 10, the client would be like, "Oh, I get it. This is just something I didn't understand." I am finding these days it's getting it to look good on the phone, which is a new
Yep.
thing for me. Like if it looks good on a phone, because that's where they're going to
That,
review a lot of creative directors, or an iPad, you're never going to have an issue. So that's kind of
yep.
where I started to steer my editing.
Couldn't agree more there. I would do the same thing. And it's very similar with sound in editing as well. It's another kind of one where it depends on the speakers, versus the monitor. But I think using a cell phone is actually a great suggestion because so much media is consumed on the phone, and iPhones and that sort of thing have such good screens now. You show it to
Yeah.
them on there and it looks good, and I think they're going to feel reassured.
And I think with a lot of people, they don't have the budget to get like I think it's an IPB screen or like a color
Mhm.
correct. Like they're expensive.
They're
They're a
very expensive.
thousand
Yeah.
and up.
And those are like the
I
consumer level ones. You get the pro level ones and they're like 50 grand. They're insane. They're super
insane.
expensive.
Even like this, like I don't personally currently rate the Apple Studio monitor because it's not even like Android friendly, as it were. Because I have a few clients on Android because we're in Europe. So, uh, more people use it here than in
Mhm.
the US, I notice. But I probably will end up getting one of those because that's the gamma people are used to these days. That comes back to that, I guess. But the cheapest option is to use whatever screen you can, even if it's TV, and then check it on a phone, and then you can go and make sure your True Tone isn't on or any other light settings. Just make sure the phone is just on like its normal brightness, not the thing that makes it orange. That was another issue once, and I was like, you got to switch your True Tone off.
Yeah.
You got to switch it off.
I've color corrected with the night mode on my computer. Like it just automatically turns on, and sometimes I won't even notice it. And then like an hour into it, I was like, oh my gosh, everything looks so orange.
I
Turn it
had to
off, and
turn
then
off those settings on my
yeah.
computer.
Hmm.
And the other thing is, this light I've got that I use. It's actually bounced against a wall, so I don't blind myself. But it does bicolor, and at night I usually switch it to super yellow, so I'm like getting ready for. Otherwise, I'm like wired. I'm like I can be up all night. So I try and move it to a yellow. But the issue is I made the mistake of color correcting while that was on yellow, and I took it off, and then everything was like not the right color.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's
Well,
not, it's about the environment as well. It's not even just the screen, which is madness.
definitely agree. Yeah, I've run into that problem. So if you're watching this, don't make that mistake of color correcting with the nighttime light on your screen. We got about probably just over 30 minutes or so before we need to wrap things up and kind of do a recap. So I will let you get into it. But for
Yeah.
those of you in the chat and everything, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button both on Behance and over on YouTube. Also, if you are on Behance and you have someone you want to recommend to be on the stream, up near the chat in the upper right hand corner, there's a guest recommendation tab. So if you have someone that you think would be a good addition to the Adobe community, be sure to send in that recommendation. We've been hanging out with Mandy, and she is showing us all things about color correcting. I've already learned quite a bit just in terms of like technical stuff, which is great. I'll be going back and rewatching this because this will be available after the stream. So take notes. And yeah, she's just been walking us through color correction on some clips. And then we're going to take that into Photoshop, use generative fill, and learn some new stuff. So,
Yeah, we're going to totally do that right now. Just before I go, as like a little tip, because a lot of people don't know about this, because again, this is a feature that only came out in the last, I want to say 9 months or so, but it might, I don't know. Time means nothing to me anymore. It could have been much longer. So I have this log clip here. Again, it was called Catch the Game. It was a pun on like, did you catch the game? No. And then she literally doesn't catch a board game. And there's like a commentator over it going, oh, she fumbled it again.
oh, I love
Uh,
that. That's
it's
so
it
fun.
I like these kind of jokes. This is what me and my friends do for fun. So
That's so much fun.
uh,
I love that you do that. This is why
this
you
is
made that career transition, right? From what you were learning, just to do
yeah,
fun.
exactly. Like I do a lot of beauty, but honestly, comedy is my mad passion. Like one day I hope to be working in comedy narrative and do something like The Bear. Like, anyway, just finished it. So what you do is you go up to Premiere Pro and your settings and general. It's right there on the first menu. You don't even need to look for it. And you can literally just tick this box called auto detect log color video space. And it normalizes it for you, which is wild that it does that now. I wish I had that.
Wait, walk
Um,
me through again. What did that just do here?
this log footage is now graded because it basically takes the log and puts the Rec 709 on it for you.
Oh, okay.
And it is new. Not many. I feel like
Yeah, I didn't
loads of
know
people
about that.
missed
This
this.
is great.
That's my Apple computer. So before we go into my system settings, you go Premiere Pro, settings, general. You can see that box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you go into auto detect log color video space. And if I switch that off again, it will go back to log.
Oh, interesting. And when you export with that setting on, is it with like how is it
Yeah.
looking? It's okay. It's updating that in the export as well.
So it's just instead of having a Rec 709 adjustment layer, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
you just can whack that on and it does it.
Excellent.
I think like just to be, I'm still in that. I feel like there's an
Transition.
in between space where you don't fully trust your technology, and maybe that's just because I'm a millennial and I saw the bad technology. So occasionally I'm still like, here's an adjustment layer. We know that this is the right LUT from Sony or whatever, Blackmagic, or it's the one up here. They have a few bespoke here for like RE cameras, Alexas, Phantoms, all sorts. But it does do that, and it's a time saver if you just have a lot of long footage that you don't want to go through, because it recognizes it, and that's fun. So we're going to actually go into this clip, which I showed you, and we're going to make it not the same. This is more of like and here's one I did earlier, and we're going to make our own version. And this is, oh, whoops. I had that auto detect on when I did this. So general.
It's an interesting effect.
Very interesting effect. It would have been, there
It's
we
on
go.
purpose. It's creative. It's art.
All on purpose. But like I put it in a stadium and I made these, like I made it look like there's a crowd and it wiggled. Like these symbols don't make sense. I did mock this up super quickly. So I was just like a sign and I was like, sure. So yeah, now it looks like we're in a giant stadium, some sort of weird, ominous sports stadium.
This is great.
Like, which is fun. Like this does the job, especially if like say I wanted to crop it for a 16:9 format. I have a lot more wiggle room now. I don't have to, if I did it here, I would only be able to have a little, like some of them in, not all of it, and you lose some of the joke, I guess, a little bit in the because sometimes comedy lives in the wide. But here you can like, I would be able to get almost all of that in to a, like I can make it so that all of that's in the 16:9 and it's filled and it's interesting and you're not feeling like something's amiss.
Yeah.
So with that.
So did you shoot this just at a park or?
Believe it or not, one of our friends is pretty bougie, and she has
a stadium,
giant lawn.
Okay.
No, it's actually, she has a big lawn, which is a big deal in London.
Wow, that's huge. Okay.
Yeah, it's her parents' lawn.
Good
lawn,
friend
to
to
be
have.
fair. And she had just had it, the gardener come over and mow it, so it had these stripes, and we're like, that looks like a football field or a soccer field or whatever. So we were like, we will use that. So it was like totally a cheap location. Love that for us. The house there is really interesting. Like it's got like we did a whole table tennis bit, and like it was weird. You gotta love a weird house.
I love the creativity and the idea here to just put it in a stadium and have that much more fun with it. So
yeah, and like
definitely
actually,
excited to see how you did that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna try and go into it. I put on also this like mask on a wave warp. So there's a mask here over like what Photoshop thought a crowd would look like. It is in beta. I will say that much. Like, hasn't quite gotten crowds 100%, but for a joke that's 3 seconds long, I don't think it matters. You know, we could have had like dolls and people would have still gotten it. And I just made them wiggle so they look like they're cheering and interacting, because literally that part of the video is 3 seconds long. So
yeah,
when it's like, oh, she fumbled it again, like that's literally the entire length of that clip that we used. So what I did is, the first thing you want to do is you want to take a still, and you can do that by using the export frame camera on like your program monitor. If you do not see that, you go into this plus sign and you just go up to here and you drag it in. I don't know where I put it now. No, there it is. It's moved. So to do that, you maybe it's not here I want to export, because we want to export a frame of this shot, because we're going to expand it. So I would try and find where probably someone hits the edge the most of that frame, so I know no matter what, I've got the edges covered. So I'd watch it quickly. Everyone stays roughly within frame. That's kind of important when you do this. Does not work if people have limbs going out the frame. It ruins the entire illusion. Um, Currently, one day, maybe one day it'll be like, and here's the elbow we lost. But right now it doesn't work. So right now I can see this dude. Actually, that is my husband at the edge of the frame. So I'm going to take it from around here, and I will click the still, and I will just send it to my desktop. You can import it to your project, but you don't need to because this is something we're using for Photoshop, and be like, 5SF still done. Okay. So there is that. And then what I'm going to do, and you're not going to see this the way I do it, I guess, because it's on my desktop down here. I'm just going to drag that into the Photoshop beta or open it up in Photoshop, which is here now. By the magic of the internet, I have made it appear. And I wanted to show the process of what I did earlier as well. Sorry, excuse me. I'm just going to have to tuck this down. So I actually had the frame in, and I built, these are all the different layers I played with, and it's all done with the AI features in Photoshop Beta now, which is kind of fun. So you can really customize it and play with it. You don't have to take your first option. So the new one, there we go. There's a new feature. You go into the crop tool and you get this bar called Generative Expand. Only came out, I think, like a week ago. This is brand new. So I was playing with this, like learning it.
It's so much fun.
Because before it was the generative fill and you'd have to scale it down, and then you change the inside for the outside of the mask and all sorts. But now you can just literally, I'm going to have to make this smaller actually, because I need more room to work. So I'm going to make this much bigger. Actually, before we do that, let's make my life a bit easier and change it to a 16:9 ratio, because I know that's the size of the video.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to pull this around here, I guess, and then I'm going to try and center it to the bottom. There we go. Nice. Let's get that back here so we can see everything. So I feel like that's centered. I'm going to give it a little jiggle with the shift tool just to see. Yeah, it says it's like, you'll know because it's like Photoshop is like nudging you to be like, it's here. And then I can either just click Generative Expand and click Generate and see what it generates, which I will do just to show you, I guess.
And it's quick too. And
it's for what it's doing, I'm genuinely shocked.
Yeah, and this is all inside of Adobe Photoshop Beta. So if you don't have that installed, you need to go to the Creative Cloud desktop, and it's on the left-hand side. There's a tab there for beta apps specifically, and you can just download it and try it out.
So it's made this, which is
that your friend's
convincing. Oh, maybe. And there's a couple of different versions. I like that it's made this person that's kind of terrifying in the corner. Like it's given it a go.
Oh yeah, it's trying.
I mean, it's still new, and like
beta.
That's amazing. Like I don't even know where that is. That's like, what's going on here? This is like fencing trees. But still, like I didn't give it any prompt, and it was like, maybe you want something like this. Maybe. It's an educated guess. But maybe I'm like, that's not what I want. So let's try sports pitch, something like that. I find if I put in football or soccer, it's still confused because I think it's such a new feature trying to learn what those spaces are, which is understandable. But
I don't know if you're like me too. Like I'll do this and I'll just keep hitting generate, and I'll just rack up like 12 different options, and I'll just go through them to see. Like it's fun to just look at all the different options, and then sometimes you're like, wow, maybe I should use this one instead. I don't know.
Yeah, like this one does look like my friend's garden. Yeah, like it didn't quite understand that. So let's try stadium. Like it took a few tries when I did this yesterday as well. I could show you the prompts I got there, and it's not perfect every time, but I'm still like, this is still much more impressive to me to get like a much more expansive idea of what is happening in that environment. You're not just got that, oh, this is perfect.
Oh, wow.
So we can play with this. So, right, I say it's perfect. It has some issues. We're going to deal with those.
Yep.
So like, okay, it hasn't quite understood where the crowd is right now. So we might take sections of it. Let's try and see if we can do it here. And write crowd. Let's see if this works, because I haven't played with this one.
Jeff says this is kind of like what's done in old movies where they just create about. I mean, my brain automatically goes to like Star Wars, like
Yeah,
the original Star Wars,
like
and
miniatures.
like how they just created everything there before stuff existed. But it's like all just fake backgrounds. I love it.
It's actually got it quite well there. So I wonder if I can get it to do it around here. Crowd. It did it. Like this is what I if it was like this the whole way around, that would be perfect for me
Done.
because it is such a short joke. And honestly, I've seen worse on other B movies. So
And yeah, and I mean, a week from now, like this, the beta stuff is constantly evolving, like every day, and it's kind of cool too because as you're generating things, you can hit that little thumbs up button next to the generate
oh
little
yeah,
tab that comes up, so
absolutely.
you can actually give feedback to the Adobe team and hey, this is a great job, or this one didn't work so well. So it is cool that they're taking all that feedback and it is improving constantly.
Yeah. This part looks a bit like a motorway though. It's getting there. Let's see what we've got crowd wise there. This one looks a bit different. I'm just looking for something that's a bit different more than anything, so it's not one blob of color, or doesn't look like waves. So I'll just very quickly do the last bit, and then we'll get rid of those two weird men at the bottom.
So we got about 20 minutes before we wrap up. We do have Andrew asking a question, and I don't know. I know you have a couple different layouts for your computers here. Is it possible to just very quickly show? I kind of described it, but can you show the Creative Cloud desktop by chance and show how to get access to the beta Photoshop?
Yes, sorry, took me a second. Let's see where this comes up. So I hit a little cloud icon for me. You can do like one of the things you can do is there's a little cloud icon in the corner of your screen generally. That's like when you're logged into an Adobe product. Could be Photoshop, could be Premiere. And when you're logged in, you'll generally on the apps view get
Mm-hmm.
this kind of look. Um, you can go to all apps and play with that and have a look around and see what you want to add. Like there's loads of different beta apps in here actually. Um, or I'm pretty sure there is just a beta
Yeah, there's a
apps.
tab
There
there for it.
is
Yep.
a tab, and it's Photoshop right now. They're pushing it because this is
It's
like a
super
big
cool.
deal. It's a big deal. So you can just add it there. It's
Excellent.
free.
Yeah,
So
thanks for
don't worry
sharing
about the
that.
buy now. No, yeah, no worries. There's also like other options here, and I know there's loads of fun stuff coming into all these different apps or all the time. So it's worth playing with that. That would be really cool. I can't wait to see what comes in after Max because like it's got to be insane if they're just putting this in on a like a
I know.
Wednesday.
I feel like they're like reeling us in, like it's like a tease, and like there's big stuff in the works. I feel.
Yeah,
For anyone
definitely.
just joining us, we're hanging out with Mandy. She is showing us all the tips for color correction with log footage and with just all kinds of footage, really, how to use scopes, that sort of stuff. But now we're actually getting to the really creative, fun stuff inside of Adobe Photoshop beta version, where we're using generative fill to create a background for a fun little scene that she's created. If you missed any of it, definitely go to YouTube, go to Behance, and you can rewatch this anytime you want or share it with people. So,
Yeah, right now I'm just tidying it up so that we can bring it into Premiere quite quickly. But I also want to add some things to it. I'm just being like, I wouldn't be comfortable with a weird shadow. Like it's glass here. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm just it will figure it out. It's like, oh, you like grass? Here you
mm-hmm.
go. Like this kind of stuff is okay. I've only had a couple of rogue things where I've been surprised. I do know that currently Photoshop Beta doesn't understand hammers that well. Don't ask me why, but if you want a hammer, just say gavel. It seems to understand what that is. Don't know why. And at one point, I was like smooth face and it put a pregnancy test on it, and that was just so funny.
So, what we're doing right now is the new generative fill feature, and you're able to select these areas, I guess, with the lasso tool and generate things, but also just to recap really fast, tell us how you expanded the image again for anyone who might have missed it, just the process of it.
So I went into Photoshop. I was in Premiere and I did the export frame tool, which is a little camera icon. I can show you when we're back in the software how I got to that, just as a reminder. And then I just dragged that from my desktop onto my Premiere Beta app and it opened it up. And then after that, I took this tool up here, the crop tool. And now when you open up the crop tool, you get this at the bottom, a little prompt box, at least in the beta version of the software, not currently in the shipping build of Photoshop. And you can do generative expand with that, which is great. And that's where you can make your frame bigger and give it more information. This works amazing as well, like with beaches and stuff. I think that this is quite a niche use case I went for. I could have just like been like, make the sea wider and it would have done it perfectly. But I think it's also good to see how creative you can get with it. And like, I
Absolutely.
enjoy that.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks for showing that again. Yeah.
No problem. Just before we go, I feel like we can add I don't know, like though what should we put here? Like maybe a goalpost?
Oh yeah.
A sports
This is what's
goalpost?
cool
What?
is you could just play with all of it and continue going. And every iteration is different. Like I think right now the process you're showing is just how to go about it. Like basically teaching people how to make the lemonade. And what we saw before is kind of like how you did it, and then now the actual
Oh,
technique used for it.
doesn't quite. Although actually that works, but not quite in that way. You know, like it looks like a sports field of a made up sport.
Yeah. And
Um,
and I found it has to be like definitely what you draw with the tool, whether it's the lasso tool or the oval tool. It needs to like the shape has to match up to what it's trying to do, and it can be tricky sometimes to like visualize that in your head of what shape does this goal, whether it covers up the background audience or not, or
right.
with parallax and that
Doing
sort of
a.
stuff.
I should be doing the rectangle one. I should absolutely be doing. Bear in mind, I'm trying to make it like a soccer goalpost, but I don't think it knows the difference between footballs yet. Um,
Yeah,
so let's just stay
soccer, football.
because I would
The
write
age old
football and
discussion. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Because you're over in the UK, so
I am. I am currently here. You wouldn't know from this green wall with a light in the background. Um, but I'm giving it one last hurrah here. If not, I'll just take what we've got into Premiere because I feel like it does the job.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think like the important part here is to really show people what your process was. And I think people can go download the app and play around with it and test out their results with it.
I'm wondering if I can change the fill of it. Not really convincingly. You know what? I think it works better without. I was just trying to play. So when you're happy with that, what you want to do, and this is important, is you want to switch off the original layer with the either screenshot in it essentially. And this looks really weird, but it's important. And then you just want to export it as a PNG. So we'll just do a quick PNG export. 5SF still on my desktop. Save. Right. Lovely. And now I'm going to hide Photoshop if it will let me. Sorry, it's on a different screen. That's why I'm looking down. And we're back where we were. You'd think it would save to the right desktop, but a desktop's a desktop, I guess. So
All the
it's fine.
things we get to deal with multiple screens and even computers.
So now I'm just going to drag this literally on top. And the first thing we notice is like, oh, this is much bigger than we need it to be. And both of those are way too big. So a very quick way to fix this is to go to set frame size, and it should make that still the same size as that frame. Much easier than going into the scale and spending a minute guessing what you did, especially with the when you are expanding it as opposed to making it more exact.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do that. I'm just going to bring that to the edge of that clip, and I'm going to go underneath. And now I am going to have to play it by ear a little bit underneath and figure out what that was. It's probably 55. That's 55. So, and then because that clip is underneath, it should, in theory, when I bring this in, be perfectly
Look
hidden.
at that.
And now they're playing sports. It's where they catch a board game.
or didn't catch the game.
Yeah, I didn't catch it. She missed the game.
I love that. That's such a creative use, and also just a really fun use as well of doing that.
This one's actually smaller than this one, so I guess I just kind of was feeling a bigger stadium. But like you could do it with desks if you need, just like if you filmed like this and it's too close for your social media, you can make more room and it will figure out the edges and it's subtle. If you're filming on a white wall, you can build a room around you. I've seen people do. If you're just like, if as long as you stick within your boundaries and don't cut off your hand like this, if you're
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, I wouldn't recommend talking like this, but
And this is it's just a short little shot. And then would you color correct this afterwards? Would you have color corrected it before?
I
Does it
put the
matter?
Rec 709 on because I feel it matters to the sense that you want your PNG to be the same color as the base footage. And then I would do an adjustment layer in grade. So I personally would correct it to the color I want that base footage to be, because then the export you're making in Photoshop is going to look like what you needed it to be in Premiere, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm
Yeah.
talking gibberish.
No, that totally
Um,
makes sense.
but otherwise, I would probably just do an adjustment layer, quick one, whack it on. And let's, for argument's sake, very quickly go to a really random one of these. Fuji Be Soft. Um, and you can change the intensity. And now it all looks like it's part of it the same. Ignore this. This isn't understanding what's happening, because this is being corrected by the software itself already. This is what it looks like. So don't worry about the little preview. But like you wouldn't, like, now it all looks like it's seamlessly together. You wouldn't know that that was separate. And I've done like a quick LUT on it. And like if I could make it look crazy bright, it all looks the same. It all matches up, which is great. There's no seams, that's the worst. That's the biggest giveaway when you've done something.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Um,
Well, I'm not sure. Do you have other stuff to share here? Otherwise, I have some ideas of some things we could play with too.
I honestly thought we were more pushed for time. So,
Oh, you're
and
good. We
it,
still we can still chat, I think, for like maybe another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll kind of recap everything we've gone through. Um,
yeah,
but
otherwise I'm
maybe
happy to go into curves or
yeah, I got a couple questions. Let's go into the other shots you had that we were playing with earlier.
yeah, I would happily love to show you how to
Well, I'm
normalize
curious
log
to
footage.
see, I think everyone's really interested in the new generative fill as well. And it would be fun to maybe take one of these other simplistic ones and see if we can expand the background a little bit, like pretty much the same thing. So I was curious, maybe we can look at a couple of these again.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
So
maybe even
like
this one. Obviously, your head's being cut off a little bit there, but it would just be fun if it was a still image or if we were trying to do
let's
a
have a
similar
look and
thing.
see what we
Like,
got.
I think it'd just be fun to
Uh
play with it and see what we can come up with, or we could keep using that
that's a
field
moving
one
one.
and see if we can
Let's
get some
use
other
this
options.
one and go with just I wonder if I could, hang on, let me duplicate this image because I have an idea off the top of my head. She does a lot in this clip, I'm pretty sure. There we go. So there's a bit at the end where she's not touching it and she's doing this instead. So let's just get rid of the rest. Oh no, wrong side. That bit. Using just
Perfect.
the shortcuts Q and W if anyone's interested how I got rid of that so quickly. Like Q is anything to the left, delete, and W is anything to the right, delete.
And so what we're going to do right now, just to play around and show kind of the process again, the same process you did with, the field, the catching the game. But maybe we just try it with a different image and see how it does.
Yeah.
And then everyone will see kind of that whole workflow again.
Yeah, you'll see the how the sausage is made. So we're gonna go to our export frame setting, which by the way is also Shift E if you like shortcuts. But I also, for me, I like the visual camera. I don't know why. I use shortcuts all the time, but this one is just not one that's ever stuck. Let's do Shay Sky. Let's just call it Shay. She's called Shay. She's a wonderful model from Dubai. I don't know her last name. We weren't with each other that much longer. And then I'm just going to go and open up Photoshop again. And here is Shay kissing, smizing, doing a great job. We love Shay. I'm going to go up to the crop till.
Let's hear
Sorry.
anyone in the background. We'll go ahead and I'll let you expand it real quick, but I'm curious if anyone has any recommendations on what we could add to this scene once we expand it. Like, what do we want to put in the background?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to keep her in the bottom of the frame. It's a bit red, this shot, actually, on the screen. I'm definitely going to put her in the bottom of the frame because she doesn't have a
Yeah,
body.
that.
And I feel like I could make it generate a body. I just feel like that's a bad idea. Let's see. Like, and also she wouldn't be moving, so it would like her shoulders would move too much.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not a
you
good
got the
idea.
right idea. I'm thinking maybe we can like add, whether it's shelving or something in the background.
Let's see what it
Um,
wants to come up with.
yeah,
And then
see how
we
it
can
does.
add stuff.
We'll put it through the ringer.
Yeah,
This is
we
the fun
totally
part
can.
where we can just kind of wing it. And yeah, again, to do that expand there, Photoshop Beta crop
That's
tool, and look at that.
perfect.
I mean, that's impressive.
Like use
And now
case wise,
you got
like
a 4K
oh,
image. You need to take it up to 4K.
it's actually added. I didn't have that image at the bottom, it
Oh yeah,
turns
look
out.
at that. It added the top of her head there.
It shouldn't have. Why did it do that? So actually, because I don't want it to add that. So hang on, let's have a look again. Why did it do that?
Josh says,
Sorry.
let's do a sky replacement. We're gonna really
I
test it here.
absolutely want to do a sky replacement. I'm just trying to go back a bit. It's just not going back. I just want to delete that layer for a second. So the other way, by the way, you don't have to just use the crop tool. This is actually really good for me to do this. So you can go in and oh no, that's not the right tool. It's this one I wanted. Um, and you can box this off here. Yeah, why did it generate a new head? That's bizarre. Um, so you could do this, and then you want to make sure you click select inverse. There it is. I know what I wanted, and that's going to do everything around the edge. And then you can just again click generative fill and generate. So it's going to do the same thing, but we already made the canvas a 16:9 square, so it's figured it out. I just want to make sure it's not generating that top basically, because when we go back into Photoshop, I don't want to have a goofy load of head. There we go. That's a beautiful job.
Yeah, that does a really
Much
good
better.
job.
Does a really good job twice. Like it's not even. I would have thought that some of the grade might have fallen off, but it's done great. So sky replacement. Uh, maybe should we do a lasso tool because it like try and get a cloud in and see.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it.
Let's go soft fluffy clouds. I feel like being exact before we get a cartoon. I'm worried about getting a cartoon. You know,
Mm-hmm.
soft fluffy clouds. Um, let's see what it does. But it's a really interesting way to be able to change the frame, and like I could now add text behind her if I wanted to. Like I would have to mask her out, but like I can do whatever.
We're turning
That's
in this into like an advertisement for the side of like a bus station or something. This is
yeah,
fun.
literally. What can we do? Maybe what could be like I don't know. Let's do the moon. Like let's really confuse people. And see what it comes out with. And maybe it's like daylight moon, like when it's like winter and you see the moon at 4 p.m.
This is where the fun comes in.
Ooh.
Whoa.
Uh
Okay.
I mean it's
Look at
okay.
that.
I
Look
don't
at that moon.
okay, let's see if it understands daylight moon. I'd be interested to know
I
if it
wonder
does
if
that.
you were to just I'm curious if you were to like kind of select around her kind of like a garbage mat and then select the inverse and like if we could try like a whole new like
I would love
just
to.
like a sky.
Let's do that. Let's
Like I'm
totally do that. I'm
curious
gonna
if
get rid
that
of
would work. I don't personally know, so this is kind of a test for me too.
I hang on, what's this layer again? So she's gonna be moving around that area. So I want to stay roughly here, I guess.
Yeah, we could try. I almost think you could get the edge of her and it might recognize it and fill that in, but yeah, let's try it out.
Okay, I could go. I don't want to go. I know she moves back and forth there, so I'll go closer. Um, select inverse, and then you just want to see what it does.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Like if you were to just type in like
I'll
sunset or
type it in.
something and then hit
Yes,
generate.
because it already made the background. Sunset.
And each of these layers it makes too is it's kind of nice because in Photoshop it just adds a layer on top. So you can always just toggle it on and off in the layers panel there.
Yeah, I've just realized it's done it underneath the panel, so that's not
Mm.
ideal. So let's try. Let's hold this one
So
down and do it.
yeah, I wonder for this
Um,
scenario, I think you'd actually need to maybe even get like a little bit of her shoulder and her head just on the very edge. I don't know because it might just deform her too. But this would just
okay.
be if it was a still image. I think we're kind of just playing around. But
Okay. Okay. Let's do a whole new one then. From here, would you say? Like,
Yeah, like right, just I would think that even right on her shoulder, because I think that's like the bounding box essentially. So it probably won't generate past there. So,
okay, let's try that. Generative fill sunset.
or even
Oh,
if
I
you were
forgot
to
to select
select
invest.
her as a individual image and take out the blue entirely, and then just put her on like a sunset background.
Maybe.
We're getting in
Maybe
the
I will try
weeds there. We
that.
may not have
We're
time for all
getting
that, but
maybe not. Let's have a go. Right. So
if that doesn't work, I don't know. Maybe we could add like maybe we put some like shelving or something.
that's
Okay, we're going
okay.
down the
There
rabbit hole.
I know what the second option is. It's very tiny. This is terrifying.
Oh, oh my gosh. So much
So we didn't
fun.
quite get it. And that's fine. So I'm gonna get rid of. Maybe I'll just. Maybe I.
Yeah, we can toss those.
I think we could toss those. Like it's not perfect, so I'm just gonna general. Let's give it more context of what's happening. There is blue sky, um, and it is a pink sunset, like pink sunset clouds. That's not a word. That's wow. Not. I'm even looking as I type. I have no idea how I did that. Um, and we'll see what it comes up with in the frame out of
Yeah,
curiosity.
if it's able to blend that, that'll be pretty impressive. So,
Sometimes it just maybe needs context of this is blue. So we'll see.
and I do have a question too. What is when we've been talking about color correction, but like video in general, you've been doing all these sorts of things, and you got your Instagram, your website, which our moderators can share there. But what is your favorite thing to do? Is it color correction? Is it just the creative elements? Is it shooting?
I mean, I've bounced between different areas. I guess like because you spend like a year or two deep in something, and then you go into something else, and you find love and joy in something else. When I'm editing, I think I like the color correction process so much because it's near the end, and you can see it's a good edit. Um, I actually am not the biggest fan of editing till about 70% through my edit. I think it's the biggest chore because it's like it's how a writer must feel. Like there's nothing
Yep.
on the page.
It's so
Um,
stressful at first when you're trying to like piece it all together.
yeah, not the biggest fan, but like for me, I do love color grading because it's satisfying. But I actually really love creating as well pitch decks for shoots, which is such a weird area to be in. And I really love directing and being on set. I say if I have to pick my favorite thing, it's being on set. This is what I was afraid of. You remember earlier I was like, I think it
Yep.
might do cartoon clouds.
Yep.
So
It's
let's
a
try
look. It's a
just
look. It's not
maybe
the
it's
one
the
we're looking
pink.
for, but maybe that's it.
Maybe the pink is throwing it off. I find it interesting that it's trying to do identical ones. Um,
Well,
but
why don't
yeah, what about for you? If I can ask, what's your
Oh,
favorite?
I do all sorts of things, but nobody cares about me. I do shooting, editing. My favorite is probably shooting, and just directing. It's very similar, but
It's very
um,
Oppenheimer.
I know I need to see that movie. Maybe you can walk us through just like a 2-minute recap from kind of what we've been working on this entire stream for maybe anyone who's just checking in or missed the beginning. This will
Absolutely.
be live later, or not live later, but it'll be archived so you can watch it, rewind. And there's some great color notes you touched on there that I personally will be going back and taking a look at just for my own knowledge. So yeah, walk us through kind of what we did in like the short like 2-minute form.
So for me, I introduce people to color scopes because I think people are very intimidated by them, and they will often try and correct things by eye. And unfortunately, eyes are just wildly inaccurate and adapt to whatever situation we're in. I know that because the conversations we've had today have been talking about monitors, screens, and lights, and how much that changes how we color grade because our eyes just adjust to any environment they're in. So we went through our Luma waveform, which showed us how to expose properly within our image, look at our darks, our lights, shadows, and highlights. Then we moved on to our vector scope, where we looked at skin tones and how to more accurately present those on screen. And then lastly, went through the RGB parade very briefly. I didn't really get to deep dive into how we would normalize something from it, but like here, I can tell like everything is way too pink. This is much higher than it should be. For example, we did make this a little better than it was, I think. Um, And we basically went through and learned what trace was on every waveform as well, and how to read our traces so we can now see how an image is reflected correctly within our scopes. Then we went through basic color correction and how to use the new auto tool, as well as understanding our exposure, our contrast, our highlights, shadows, and whites and blacks, and how they're represented on our scopes from our basic color correction panel. And how we also spoke about the difference between color correction and color grading, because there is a massive difference. And then we had a brief chat about the difference between vibrance and saturation and how that affects an image, and how vibrance brings up the lows of an image to kind of and brings more color into those colors from the low end of their colors, whereas saturation just brings up every color at whatever area they're on the spectrum and makes everything just super bright and colorful. So like that's why vibrance feels more subtle. And then last sorry. So lastly, we went through as well hue versus hues and how to change the colors of things via hue versus hue, which was super nice and easy. And I had a clip where we did that, but I can't find it. Maybe it's just Shay. There she is, where we changed the background color. No, that's hue versus luma. My apologies. Where we changed the background color here, and we played a little bit with her skin. We've made her a smidge, I think, yellow there. She should be a bit pinker. There we go. So thank you so much for tuning in today. You can check out all the other lives. Alex was a fantastic host. Thank you for all your comments. It's been absolutely incredible. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining me. I've really enjoyed this. This was my first live for Adobe Live across Behance and YouTube. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll catch you in the next one.